Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, colleagues. Welcome to the high-level panel discussion on inclusion in national social protection systems. As many of you are aware, and if you've heard over the last day and a half, that the number of refugees and IDPs is ever increasing. The number has gone to 114 million now. But that's just not just the number that is a problem which we are looking at. It's also the protractedness of the displacement, which is a major concern around refugee hosting countries. We believe that 4 out of 5 refugees remain displaced for over 5 years, and many of them are displaced for decades. We have heard in the last many panels refugees who have been in neighboring countries for 2, 3, 4 decades or beyond in some places. Now, social protection can play a critical role in supporting displaced population by building their resilience and breaking the cycle of reliance on humanitarian assistance. Over the past few years, we have seen a significant increase in donors' investment in social protection systems in developing countries. In some cases, this has translated into opening windows for inclusion of displaced along host communities. These investments are much welcomed. But refugees are concentrated in low and lower middle income countries. Also, we've heard in several panels, 75% of them are low and lower middle income countries. And even those countries where national systems are stronger, displaced persons face a range of barriers and prevent them from benefiting from social protection programs. Inclusion requires legal framework, policy space, civil documentation, the foundation of protection and solutions, but need to be complemented with increased financing and technical assistance for strengthening national capacities. This way, we can ensure that social protection systems provide adequate and comprehensive support to displaced and host communities. We've also recognized, data shows that forced displacement is not just a humanitarian challenge. Forced displacement is a development challenge, and it is within this policy space that discussions on inclusion need to be pursued. So without further ado, I hand over to Ms. Najeeba Wazifa Dost, who will be moderating this side event. And I was reading Najeeba's resume. It's very impressive, and I'm going to go through that very quickly. Najeeba is a former refugee and one of the founding members of the Global Refugee Network, Global Independent Refugee Women Leaders, and the Asia Pacific Network of Refugees. Najeeba is also a member of the advisory board to the UNHCR Task Team on Engagement and Partnership with Organizations led by displaced and stateless persons, as well as a seasoned advocate, educator, and a public speaker. And she's also a researcher. So we couldn't have a better facilitator than Najeeba for this session. So I am now ably handing it over to in the able hands of Najeeba to take it through from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Mr. Malik for his kind introduction. We have a truly distinguished panel here today with us, and I am thrilled to be moderating this panel discussion. As a means of overcoming some of the barriers that Mr. Malik was mentioning, and in the spirit of overcoming the economic inclusion and social protection multi-stakeholder pledge, there is a significant complementarity and reinforcement between social protection and economic inclusion, which we will be further elaborated on during the panel discussion. For those who are interested in more data and information on access to socioeconomic rights, such as the rights to work and the right to social protection, feel free to take a look at the banners in the room and the benchmark and the bookmark that we've shared with you, which contains a QR code linking to the Pledge website and the digital library, the latter containing numerous publications that may be of interest to you. In addition, one of the banners highlights data from our recent Global Livelihood and Economic Inclusion Survey, which looks at the refugee access to employment and social protection. The QR on the banner will link you to the full survey report. So again, I encourage you to look at the report and have a read. In today's session, and with the support of our distinguished panelists, we will explore how access to national social protection systems helps to ensure better protection outcomes and lays for the foundation for durable solution. So now allow me to clarify the format of our session. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to present on good practices and lessons learned in their work and context, and will be addressed with one question, which they will have 5 minutes to respond to. At the end of the panel session, we are actually thrilled to say that we will have about 20 to 30 minutes for additional interventions that are coming from the floor. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. First, we have Mr. Niels Annen, Parliamentary State Secretary, Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, Government of Germany. Next, we are honored to have Mr. Hamoud Ul Mohammed, Minister and General Delegation of Tazur, General Delegation for National Solidarity and Fight Against Exclusion, Government of Mauritania. Our panel also includes Ms. Elizabeth Taylor-Jay, Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Government of Colombia. Joining us is Ms. Ifat Sharif, Social Protections and Job Global Practice, Global Director, World Bank. So let us start with Germany, starting with Parliamentary State Secretary Niels Annen. I'd like to note that Mr. Annen has a prior commitment and will need to leave this panel at around 5 p.m. Parliamentary State Secretary Annen will speak about Germany's support to social protection in displacement settings and why it is a priority for German development cooperation. Parliamentary State Secretary Annen has a remarkable background, having served as a Minister of State in the Federal Foreign Office from 2018 to 2021, and served as a member of the German Bundestag for several years. Prior to that, Mr. Annen was senior resident at the German Marshall Fund in Washington, D.C., and he worked for the Department for International Policy Analysis of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Berlin. Mr. Annen is an expert on the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Latin and Central America. Over to you, Parliamentary State Secretary Annen.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for including me in that distinguished panel. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, as has been mentioned, strengthening social protection indeed has been made one of the political priorities of the German development cooperation. My boss, Minister Svenja Schulze, our minister, signed a joint declaration with the ILO and with the World Bank, which is also represented here, which I'm very happy about, on a closer cooperation of job creation and decent work, social protection, sustainable global supply chain, and gender equality worldwide. I think that cooperation has been very crucial to move our topics forward. And for the German development policy, social protection means protecting all people against poverty, vulnerability, and social exclusion, regardless of age, gender, or health. And I mean, we here in Geneva have been discussing the last 2 days that about 140 million people around the world, and numbers growing while we're speaking here, are refugees or IDPs, and most of them are in countries that are themselves affected by poverty and instability. So as a general rule, they have usually no reserves to fall back. And we need to make sure that there is an access, although sometimes unlimited access, but an access to labor markets, to public services and social systems. And this means that they especially lack protection if that's denied. And additional threats are growing. I mean, that's very obvious. Food insecurity, droughts, armed conflicts, disease. So we need to, I think, use the Global Refugee Forum also to create a consensus around the issue that we are discussing here. So, Chair, it is therefore vitally important that we also campaign and work for strengthening of national protection systems, especially in situations of displacement and crisis, and work with them to open them to populations and groups in need of assistance. Good networking amongst key partners and the interlinking of all the instruments of humanitarian assistance and development cooperation, so the nexus that we have been talking about, will make it easier to help cushion short-term shocks and contribute as well towards the long-term strengthening of sustainable protection structures. And that will support both displaced people, but also the host countries that we are talking about. With our development cooperation crisis response, especially with our engagement specifically for displaced people via our special initiative on displacement, we are able to create, for example, cash for work measures, short-term income opportunities with training measures, job placement services, and support to foster more long-term job prospects for refugees and for people from the host regions. We know that women in particular very much benefit from these programs. Between now and 2027, we will pledge to facilitate at least 200,000 more employment measures. And Madam Chair, to conclude, I do think it's evident that establishing national protection systems involves major challenges, and be honest, it involves the question of who's going to pay for it. We see investing in this area as not only useful, but crucial, especially in order to develop long-term prospects in drawn or displacement situation. And as my colleague from the World Bank is present here, I think that was also made very clear in the latest World Bank development report. So I conclude with that. I think it's great that the issue is given so much visibility here at the forum, and I wish to thank all our partners who have been working with us, with UNHCR and many partners on that very crucial issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Parliamentary State Secretary Annan, for that insightful presentation and impressive work. Before I actually pose a question to you, I need to give a sincere apology for missing one of our panelists. That's obviously I'm not doing a good moderation already. So we've also got on the panel with us Mr. Jeremy Obrecht, who's the Executive Director of BERAC, member of the Poverty Alleviation Coalition. And once again, my sincere apology for missing that. Thank you. Let me come back to you, Parliamentary State Secretary Annan, and let me pose a question to you. From your perspective as a major donor country, what are the key elements for improving the social protection and self-reliance for displaced persons in host countries on a structural level in the future? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for the question to be answered, we need to find ways how the integration in the existing system works, but that will require considerable efforts by the host country in terms of funding, but also in terms of the technical questions that are involved, and that's where development cooperation, I do think, really can make an impact. At least half of crisis funding that Germany provides, especially for displacement situations, will be allocated for projects for the social protection and economic inclusion of refugees and people from host communities. So we really try to integrate that thought and that discussion into the programs that we are implementing right now. And furthermore, we need a common understanding that existing systems are to be strengthened through other measures. That means harmonizing activities with the national system and our partners' measures, for example, by using harmonized criteria. So unfortunately, many of our partners are faced with more or less similar situations, and I think that harmonizing can do a good job, and that's also donor responsibility. I don't want to use the privilege to address you here for too long, but as I'm sitting next to His Excellency from Mauritania, I wanted to just mention that we are supporting, in cooperation with UNHCR, the World Bank, the World Food Programme, and UNICEF, efforts to harmonize parallel systems of humanitarian services and public sector or donor-supported programs for social assistance and employment in and with our Mauritanian colleagues. To complement these efforts, we are advising the government on the registration of refugees as a prerequisite for the inclusion in the system. The aim of this is for there to be only one social system in the long term, even if it's one that is solely partially depending on external financing, which unfortunately I think will be the case. But one system for all Mauritanian citizens and all refugees who are in Mauritania would, I think, help to alleviate the situation. And I really want to give credit to the government of Mauritania, which under extremely difficult circumstances has been very, very gracious in welcoming so many refugees. And I think we expect that kind of political decisions and behavior from a government. Our partners also need to be assured that the international community will be there to support those political efforts. Otherwise, the consequences will be long-lasting and they will be very negative for the refugees, but in that case also, I think, for the citizens of Mauritania. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, and back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Annan. Now let's move forward and introduce our next panelist, linked to Mr. Annan's mention of BMZ works in Mauritania. Next is Minister Hamoud Ould Mohamed, who will talk about the concrete experience in Mauritania with refugee inclusion in the national registry, in the National Social Registry. Minister Hamoud Ould Mohamed, General Delegate of Tazur, General Delegation for National Solidarity and the Fight Against Exclusion, was appointed as the General Delegate of Tazur in July 2023. He was Minister of Communication in 2003 and Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports in 2004. Prior to his current appointment, he was appointed as advisor to the Prime Minister, and he worked as a Director General of National Television between 2012 and 2019. He served as President of High Authority of the Press and Audiovisual Media. Over to you, Minister Ould Mahmoud.
Merci, Madame. Assalamu alaikum. Je voudrais commencer mon intervention en vous remerciant pour l'honneur qui est fait à la République islamique de Mauritanie. Pour ceux qui ne savent pas situer la Mauritanie sur une carte, elle se trouve quelque part en Afrique, entre les pays du Sahel et l'Afrique du Nord. Quelque part entre le Maroc et l'Algérie d'une part, le Mali, le Niger, le Burkina Faso d'autre part. Je tiens à faire cette précision pour que ceux qui sont informés sur la situation de cette région d'insécurité comprennent à quoi la Mauritanie fait face, comme mon collègue le secrétaire d'État l'a souligné tout à l'heure. Donc, de pouvoir vous présenter l'approche adoptée par notre pays en matière de protection sociale à travers les exemples des registres sociaux et de programme national du transfert donc, monétaire. Permettez-moi de commencer par une courte présentation des registres sociaux et du programme transfert public en Mauritanie. Ces deux programmes sont gérés, entre autres programmes, par une délégation générale à la solidarité nationale et à la lutte contre l'exclusion. Son nom est édifiant, le titre donc de la délégation est édifiant quant aux tâches qu'elles lui sont confiées. Et donc l'ancrage, donc cette agence, son ancrage se situe au niveau de la présidence de la République. Elle a été créée en 2019 grâce à la volonté d'un homme qui s'est présenté en 2019, qui se trouvait être candidat à cette période et qui est depuis lors président de la République. Le registre social a été dernièrement élevé au niveau de programme national, compte tenu des missions stratégiques dont il est en charge, ainsi que les résultats qu'il a pu obtenir en 3 ans d'existence. En fait, il gérait plus de 200 000 ménages vulnérables, soit 28% de la population, et entend élargir sa base de données à l'ensemble de la population. En plus, il compte aujourd'hui 30 utilisateurs parmi les programmes gouvernementaux et non gouvernementaux. Le registre social mauritanien a la particularité d'être inclusif, donc pouvant identifier tous les ménages vulnérables résidant en Mauritanie, quel que soit leur statut, nationaux, mais aussi étrangers et donc réfugiés. Il a la deuxième particularité, il est accessible et ouvert. Il a vocation d'être utilisé par l'ensemble des programmes de protection sociale, qu'ils soient menés par l'État mauritanien ou tout autre acteur. À ce titre, parmi ces programmes, les programmes nationaux de transfert monétaire Takavul, qui veut dire assistance en français, et El Maouna, qui veut dire aide en français. Il s'agit de transferts monétaires réguliers versés trimestriellement aux bénéficiaires et de transferts monétaires ponctuels en cas de choc, principalement en cas de pandémie, d'insécurité nationale, mais aussi de pluies diluviennes. Ça arrive, il arrive qu'en plein désert, il y ait des pluies diluviennes et qu'il y ait des chocs. Ces programmes assistent 142 000 ménages vulnérables, ciblés donc par le régime social mauritanien, dont plus de 7 400 réfugiés. Je ne m'apaisanterai pas davantage sur les caractéristiques des régions sociales et des programmes nationaux. Je voudrais plutôt souligner quelques points qui me semblent être pertinents pour cet événement. En premier lieu, je tiens à souligner la volonté de la Mauritanie, terre des hommes, à accueillir et à assister tous les réfugiés venus sur son territoire. Vous allez me permettre de dire que n'eût été la limite des ressources budgétaires, d'une part, et d'autre part, les problèmes d'insécurité que caractérisent cette zone, le concept de réfugié n'aurait pas existé en Mauritanie, parce que la Mauritanie est un pays traditionnellement et de façon légendaire ouvert et hospitalier. Notre vaste pays a subi les effets de tous les chocs propres à la sous-région, insécurité, aléas climatiques, instabilité politique, de même que les chocs mondiaux, pandémies et conflits armés. Malgré cela, notre volonté et l'objectif recherché par nos politiques est de rester fidèles à notre tradition légendaire et de rester une terre d'accueil et d'hospitalité pour les réfugiés et de les faire bénéficier des mêmes services que nos concitoyens. C'est dans ce cadre que 2 millions d'euros sont transférés annuellement au profit de nos frères réfugiés qui viennent principalement de la République sœur du Mali. En second lieu, il est à souligner que l'État mauritanien s'est résolument engagé dans une politique sociale volontariste depuis 4 ans, favorisant entre autres les filets sociaux, l'inclusion économique et l'accès aux services de base, en particulier l'eau, la santé, l'énergie et l'éducation. Ces chantiers, tous azimuts, et leur coût faramineux d'une part, et la limitation des ressources disponibles d'autre part, font que la Mauritanie a besoin du fameux concept de partage, de fardeau, de charges, pour pouvoir continuer à aller de l'avant dans le sens d'une pérennisation et d'une extension des efforts déjà déployés. Aussi, nous saisissons l'opportunité des assises du présent forum pour lancer à travers ce panel un appel à l'aide à tous nos partenaires en vue de contribuer au partage du fardeau, au partage de ces charges. Ce fardeau qui résulterait de l'alignement des avantages accordés aux réfugiés à ceux dont bénéficient déjà les nationaux mauritaniens. Mesdames, Messieurs, le gouvernement de la République islamique de Mauritanie a toujours fait preuve d'une volonté sans faille d'accueillir et de protéger les réfugiés. L'inclusion dans les services nationaux entamés à la suite du précédent forum mondial pour les réfugiés tenu en décembre 2019 est un succès, comme démontré à ce jour à travers l'exemple des régies sociales et des transferts monétaires. Nous remercions l'ensemble des partenaires techniques et financiers qui nous ont accompagnés et soutenus dans cette démarche et appelons les partenaires à poursuivre et intensifier leur soutien à un moment où notre pays fait face à des risques accrus d'afflux de nouveaux réfugiés. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the generosity of your government in extending services to refugees Given Mauritania's remarkable success in facilitating the inclusion of refugees in your national social protection system, could you share some of the enabling factors that have contributed to this achievement? What do you see as advantages for the system for national and also as a whole? Over to you, Minister Hamoud.
Merci, Madame. Je pense que pour répondre à cette question, il y a trois pistes d'éléments de réponse possibles. D'abord, comme je l'ai souligné tantôt, il y a un élément politique, il y a un élément stratégique et il y a un élément opérationnel. Sur le plan politique, vous savez, il y a deux approches possibles. Soit l'approche tout sécuritaire, que certains pays et certains gouvernements ont favorisé par le renforcement donc, des dispositifs militaires et de sécurité. Et il y a l'approche qui a, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, adoptée en 2019, qui consiste à croire qu'en donnant, qu'en adoptant des politiques sociales volontaristes et généreuses, on peut cueillir des fruits, des résultats aussi meilleurs, sinon meilleurs que ceux de l'approche tout sécuritaire. C'est ce qui a eu lieu en Mauritanie, donc dans le programme électoral du président de la République depuis 2019. Donc, d'abord, l'accès aux services de base, essayer de viser et de cibler les populations vulnérables et de leur assurer l'accès à l'école d'abord, à l'enseignement, avec comme objectif final de sortir ces populations par l'enseignement, par l'éducation, du cercle de la pauvreté. Parce qu'en fait, c'est ça la finalité. La finalité n'est pas seulement de secourir, mais oui, secourir également en urgence ceux qui sont dans un besoin absolu, qu'ils soient d'ailleurs réfugiés ou nationaux, parce que la pauvreté dans nos zones n'est pas propre aux réfugiés. Et en assurant également les services de base tels que l'eau, l'électricité, le téléphone. Je pense que ce sont ces politiques tous azimuts à travers donc, la délégation que je dirige, direction générale donc, de la solidarité nationale et de la lutte contre l'exclusion, mais également à travers les départements ministériels de la santé, de l'éducation, du MASEF, donc un ministère dédié à l'action sociale, à la femme et à l'enfant. Je pense que c'est le concours de ces politiques tous azimuts qui, de façon, par une volonté politique, devait donc contribuer à sortir donc, à réussir donc cette approche. Je le dirai encore, cet engagement était porté par la personne du président de la République. Et je pense que c'est important dans tous les pays, mais en particulier dans nos pays. Il est essentiel que la tête de l'État, dans un régime présidentiel, porte donc cet engagement, cette finalité à but social. Le deuxième facteur est également stratégique. Le gouvernement mauritanien est fermement engagé dans une stratégie d'inclusion multisectorielle en faveur des pauvres au même titre que les réfugiés. L'inclusion englobe la protection sociale, mais également, comme je l'ai dit, l'accès aux services de base au même titre que les nationaux. On essaie de favoriser une approche qui donne la même chance aux réfugiés. Et donc, des facteurs opérationnels. Le gouvernement a travaillé en étroite collaboration avec le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés et le Programme alimentaire mondial, que nous remercions au passage, et nous exprimons notre profonde gratitude à la République fédérale d'Allemagne, à l'Agence française de développement et à la Banque mondiale. Enfin, et comme je l'ai expliqué dans mon intervention, le fait que les réseaux sociaux soient accessibles à toutes les organisations et programmes a facilité l'inclusion des réfugiés dans des mécanismes de protection sociale. Je pense qu'aussi le fait qu'ils utilisent dans toutes ces interventions les nouvelles technologies a permis une visibilité et une transparence qui a fait adhérer les bénéficiaires et les acteurs, qu'ils soient gouvernementaux ou non gouvernementaux. À titre d'exemple, les réfugiés vulnérables identifiés par l'aide sociale sont pris en charge par le ministère de la Santé mauritanien dans le camp d'Emberre, c'est-à-dire le camp de réfugiés d'Emberre, d'où je viens d'ailleurs il y a 8 mois. Et ça, c'est, je pense, un autre facteur important, que les ministres visitent régulièrement ces zones. Moi-même, j'ai été il y a une semaine, le ministre de l'Hydraulique a été pour des problèmes de forage, ainsi que le ministre de l'Habitat. Cela a permis à ce jour, à près de 40 000 patients réfugiés de bénéficier des soins primaires de santé. Sur ce, je vous remercie, madame. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Minister Hamoud. Before I move on to our next panelist, maybe if I could kindly ask our panelists to keep up to 5 minutes. I'm sure we have so much to go through today. So we will now move from Mauritania to a different context with Vice Minister Elizabeth Taylor-Jay from the Colombian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who will speak now, how the temporary protection status in Colombia has helped facilitate access to social protection system. And I've also been informed that Vice Minister Taylor-Jay will also need to leave us a bit earlier today, so that could be around 5 p.m. as well. Vice Minister Elizabeth Taylor-Jay is a Raizal indigenous woman from the San Andres Archipelago, Colombia, and a biologist with 25 years of experience in the public sector. She's a marine biology graduate from Universidad del Valle and holds a master's in marine environmental protection from the Bangor University. She now serves as a co-agent for Colombia at the International Court of Justice. Previously, she was ambassador in Kenya and a representative before international organizations. Over to you, Minister Jay Taylor.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move to Spanish, sorry. That will speed up a little bit more my intervention also. So just to give you all a little bit of context, solo para darles un poquito de contexto, Colombia ha sido un territorio de migraciones de manera histórica y su situación estratégica, además en la esquina de Sudamérica, pues le da también, digamos, esa condición para poder realmente permitir temas de flujos migratorios. Hacia el norte, pues tenemos muchas fronteras, tanto las marítimas como las terrestres, y hacia el sur limitamos con 4 grandes países de Sudamérica. Por lo tanto, sí es un poco complejo. Pero para decirles que Colombia en el año 2020, nosotros solo teníamos registrados 3.922 personas que estaban migrando a través de nuestro país. A raíz, digamos, de las dificultades que en ese momento el gobierno tuvo con nuestro vecino país, con Venezuela, a partir de ahí entonces empezamos a tener un crecimiento exponencial de los flujos migratorios a nuestro país. Pasamos de 3.922 a 106.000 en 2021, a 203.000 en 2022 y en 2023 ya van cerca de 400.000. Entonces, solo como para darles una perspectiva de esto. Nosotros, de todas maneras, y no quisiéramos incluir, o sea, los movimientos pendulares de personas que, por ejemplo, a través de datos de Migración Colombia, estimó un movimiento pendular en el año 2022 de 1.870.000 personas. Bajo este panorama, entonces, los nuevos retos y desafíos que enfrenta el país en materia de migración, y lo que yo quisiera decirles es que esto ya no lo vemos como una situación anómala, sino que se convirtió en nuestra realidad recibir, digamos, tantos flujos migratorios. Estrategias entonces, y digamos a nivel de política pública, en el 2018 expedimos la estrategia para la atención de la migración, cuyo objetivo principal fue atender a la población venezolana. En 2022 formulamos la estrategia para la integración de la población migrante venezolana como factor de desarrollo para el país, o sea, como algo importante para el desarrollo endógeno también de nuestro país. Y este documento de política pública tiene, digamos, un horizonte hasta el 2032. Y radica en integrar a los migrantes a nuestra economía local y aprovechar sus capacidades humanas para aportar al crecimiento económico y al desarrollo sostenible del país. Una tercera medida, y pues yo no lo llamaría medida, sino que es mandatorio en nuestro país que cada gobernante que llega, y en el caso del periodo del presidente Gustavo Petro y la vicepresidenta Francia Márquez, pues hubo que formular el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, que tiene un horizonte de 4 años, nuestro Plan de Desarrollo Colombia, Potencia Mundial de la Vida, dentro de la cual quisiéramos destacar las siguientes apuestas que tienen que ver con la atención de los flujos migratorios, atención integral. Entonces, un punto, implementación de una política integral con enfoque diferencial y territorial, atención e integración de poblaciones extranjeras y refugiados que se encuentran en el país con vocación de permanencia, atención humanitaria y de emergencia a quienes transitan por nuestro país, fortalecimiento de las instancias de coordinación, diálogo y responsabilidad compartida entre los países de origen, tránsito y acogida de la población migrante, retornada y refugiada, entre otras. Y a esto se suman todas las políticas públicas adicionales que estamos tramitando en el Congreso. En la siguiente pregunta puedo ampliar un poco más.
Thank you for the insightful presentation, Vice President. Given Colombia's long-standing efforts and experiences in developing inclusive policies for refugees, IDPs, and migrants, what lessons can you actually share on including different population groups with a focus on social protection? Over to you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Primero que todo, decirles que hemos creado un marco jurídico e institucional para integrar a los migrantes a nuestra economía. Ya lo acabo de decir. Hemos creado, por ejemplo, el Estatuto Temporal de Protección que beneficia a los migrantes con vocación de permanencia en el país, que va a tener una vigencia de 10 años y es una llave realmente que permite abrir esa puerta de una integración real de los migrantes en nuestro país de una manera ordenada y comprensiva. También el Estatuto Temporal de Protección lo consideramos como un gesto humanitario histórico y sin precedentes en nuestro continente que busca ser un referente para que el resto de los países de la región y también a nivel mundial podamos mirar esto como un espíritu de solidaridad, especialmente en casos donde hay poblaciones que tienen, digamos, grandes desafíos. Sabemos que ha sido una herramienta que se ha reconocido a nivel internacional y pues estamos dispuestos a compartir a través de la cooperación sur-sur y la cooperación triangular las lecciones que hemos aprendido con eso. Pues ya hablé de, entonces, 1.8 millones de personas ya tienen, digamos, este estatuto o esta categoría dentro de nuestro país, así que están totalmente integrados a la sociedad. También creamos el Observatorio Nacional de Migraciones, a través del cual se recolecta y analiza información intersectorial y territorial. Cuando hablo de territorial, hablo de la distribución político-administrativa de nuestro país, municipios, más de 1000 municipios, 32 departamentos, a través de la cual se recolecta y analiza información para la toma de decisiones en materia de política pública migratoria. Otra de nuestras apuestas ha sido la caracterización de la población migrante en el sistema de identificación de potenciales beneficiarios de programas sociales, que se llama SISBEN, en el cual podemos clasificar a la población de acuerdo con sus condiciones de vida, pero a sus ingresos también. En ese sentido, poder realmente lograr focalizar la inversión social en las personas que realmente lo necesitan y garantizar que esta sea asignada de una manera justa. Esto ha permitido entonces que los migrantes en nuestros países puedan solicitar beneficios, por ejemplo, en materia de acceso a servicios públicos subsidiados, salud, educación y vivienda. Y finalmente, en los niveles regional y local, estamos trabajando en la estrategia de acompañamiento territorial, lo que hemos llamado el EAT, que busca formular un acompañamiento a los territorios con el fin de incidir en la inclusión de indicadores, programas y o proyectos en la gestión migratoria, sobre todo de 33 municipios priorizados en nuestro país, que son los que corresponden a los que tienen, digamos, el mayor flujo migratorio a partir, digamos, de todas nuestras fronteras. Y poder gestionar también, digamos, proyectos a través de los planes de desarrollo territorial de estos municipios. Nada de esto hubiera sido posible sin la cooperación internacional y el apoyo de ACNUR, de World Food Program, de UNICEF, de todos el paquete digamos, de programas y agencias de Naciones Unidas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Vice Minister. After hearing experiences from 3 different countries, we will now move to development actor. So next on the panel, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Ifat Sharif, the World Bank's Global Director for Social Protection and Jobs, who will speak about refugee inclusion from a development perspective and provide insights onto the World Bank's approach to social protection for displaced and the host communities. Ms. Ifat Sharif is the World Bank's Global Director for Social Protection and Jobs. She was previously the manager of the Human Capital Project supporting the World Bank's global agenda to protect, build, and utilize human capital in partnership with countries and development agencies. Prior to this, she held multiple positions in the Africa region as practice manager for social protection and jobs, as well as in South Asia, basically leading economics and human development program leader. Ms. Sharif has published on areas of poverty, adaptive safety nets and public works, early childhood development, microfinance, gender, migration, and jobs. Over to you, Ms. Sharif.
Thank you. This is a definitely hard act to follow in terms of the country, work, which is, extremely important and difficult, I must say. But for me, this is, thank you for inviting me to this panel, because I'm just delighted to hear the way the discussion on the refugees is shifting. So the last 2 days, I'm very encouraged to see, to hear the thinking of moving from a sort of a temporary response to more long-term development integration of the refugee challenge. In many ways, at the World Bank, our social protection and jobs portfolio has, as I noticed over the last 10 years, has also increasingly been tackling this challenge of how we think of integrating refugee population into social protection programs. And for us, we've now invested quite a large bit in terms of both our technical thinking, but also our financing in building what we call adaptive social protection system. And we're now engaging in 80+ countries, and of course in partnership with many, including Germany, and my colleague Niels mentioned some of that work. And so in terms of, when I look at the portfolio, we, as I said, we have 28 billion of investments in countries, and some of the lessons that we have, this is, countries where we now have extensive work on refugees. This includes, of course, Mauritania, and the minister spoke about the Mauritanian experience, but, all across Africa, whether it's Chad, Ethiopia, Burundi, DRC, we have a long-standing engagement in Turkey, looking at integration in labor markets of Syrian refugees that are supported by the EU. Really, when I look at that scope of work, there are 3 elements. I know you mentioned good practices. The 3 elements that come out of some of this work is that The first and foremost that we need to think about when we think about the refugee challenge is internal mobility. Allowing internal mobility of refugee population is tremendously important to sort of lessen the pressure, if you will, in host communities. Secondly, the focus on self-reliance and having access to labor markets. Again, in this session, in this forum, many discussions were on that. And the third is what we are discussing today, which is how we embed refugee populations into national social protection systems, into the social registry that, again, the minister mentioned that we are doing already, supporting the work in Mauritania. But also, and the reason why we think this is a reasonable solution to think about is because of the tremendous evaluation results that we're getting from the impact of these adaptive social protection systems. And here I must thank Germany to be a huge partner with us, along with the UK and other countries, in supporting our Sahel Adaptive Social Protection Alliance. And this is work that has not only helped us partner with other UN agencies like UNICEF and WFP, but has also allowed us to partner with impact evaluation work that is showing significant results. Country after country, whether it's Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, or Niger, what we're finding is that when we offer these adaptive social protection services, and here majority of our beneficiaries are actually women, what we see that in 18 months, you're able to see their small business revenue go up by 110 percentage points. You see consumption going up by 15 percentage points. You see poverty reduction of 20 percentage points. You see savings going up and asset building. And so this is not only helps families to cope with shocks, which is, again, many countries face frequent shocks, but this also really helps them to kind of be self-reliant. And so going forward, I think there are three things that we need to think about as a global community. The first thing is to think about medium-term financial commitments that are crucial to help us shift from into this kind of from humanitarian to long-term financing and development. Second is to, as I said, incorporate refugees into national social protection systems. And the third is the constructive global dialogue and partnerships that, again, my colleague from Colombia mentioned. And finally, I just want to sort of say that, when one thing I wanted to leave with you with is that when people move, whether it's out of desperation or whether it's in hope of a better life, they move with one thing, which is their human capital. And I think, we need to recognize that ways that we can unleash that human capital and convert them into, help them allow to become, productive contributors to society, and really, and have this, bring the intersection of social policy with economic policy. And I think that would save a tremendous amount of misery. Thank you.
Very informative presentation on the World Bank's approach to inclusive social protection system, Ms. Sharif. Thank you so much. So now let me pose a question to you. More specifically, we see a rise globally in natural and man-made disasters, which obviously has resulted in increased displacement. How can social protection systems become more adaptive and responsive to forced displacement? Thank you.
So very simply, really what we mean by, so the emphasis I mentioned earlier in my remarks that we are really zooming in and doubling down in building adaptive social protection systems, precisely because of the way they are able to respond to the multiple kinds of shocks. So the way we like to think about them, they're like multi-purpose instruments that can be used to deal with different challenges at different times. And so to do that, basically what you need is to incorporate flexibility into the design of this operation, in these programs. And I like to sort of simplify by saying that, you need to adopt this, what I call principle of 3 T's. So the first is to understand who you're targeting, your target population. In this case, we're discussing about refugees, so making sure that you are designing with that target population in mind. It goes to the second T, which is tailoring of services, right? In the case of Senegal and Niger, for example, the way we've built these programs is we have national cash transfer programs that they get basic income support, but we layer that with access to seed capital, mentoring, coaching, access to markets, very much the kind of the BRAC has also done in many countries, has implemented these what we call economic inclusion programs. And in the case of refugee populations, what we are seeing is you need to add to that the psychosocial support because of the trauma that they've gone. So then you kind of tailor the services. And then the final T, which is equally important, is the timing of the services, right? Whether if it's a climate shock, it's no good if it comes 6 months later. It has to come before or immediately after. And so the timing of the services are critically important. But embedded in these three T's and underlying these three T's is what we need, is what we call delivery systems, the social registry, the payments mechanism, the identification, all of that increasingly is being digital, which allows us to then actually move and be nimble in letting people in and out of the social registries. And the final thing in terms of climate shocks, what we are experimenting and doing a lot in many countries is we're linking these adaptive social protection programs with early warning systems, right? And so here, again, it doesn't always have to be linked to a climate early warning system. In many countries, we are building ways of predicting conflict indicators. So that could be another way of linking these adaptive social protection programs to, again, help them be better respond to these shocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sharif. Okay, we will move now to our fifth and last panelist, whom I missed to introduce before. And again, my apology, Mr. Jerome, on that. He's going to speak to us about the empowerment through the graduation approach. Jerome Obrecht has joined BRAC Global as the first executive director in 2022. He served as the Secretary General of MSF International from 2012 to 2018, having been the Director of Programs from 2006 to 2012, when he led the global positioning efforts and fundraising strategies. He has country-level experience with MSF in Africa and the Middle East. Mr. Obrecht has also served as a senior advisor to the executive director of the Global Antibiotic Research and Development Partnership, a World Health Organization initiative. Over to you, Mr. Jerome.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I also want to extend my appreciation for the comments of the panelists. So over the past 2 decades, BRAC has developed and with partners refined what's known as the graduation approach. Beyond direct implementation in a number of Asian and African countries, BRAC also provides technical assistance to governments to integrate graduation-like approaches. The graduation approach comes from out the realization by some of our frontline staff a couple of decades ago that microfinance was not able to effectively engage those too vulnerable within their own communities without the social capital and unable to join borrowing groups. The graduation model is a time-bound approach, that sequences approach that consists of 3 key components. The first one is to ensure that the participants have a productive assets or have support to actually purchase the productive assets. The second is to ensure they have the food and or connections to government services to meet their basic needs. And the third, and probably the most important, is to ensure mentorship and support from coaches to form goals and aspirations, reinforce training, offer guidance and income generating activities, and solve problems as they arise and build their livelihood. It is one of the most well-researched poverty alleviation approaches, with over 20 randomized control trials that have taken place demonstrating its effectiveness in diverse contexts across the globe. As a result of this evidence, it's been widely adopted by more than 100 partners in nearly 50 countries, including by governments. So outcomes are very impressive. Research shows from our cohort of BRAC that 95% of participants lift themselves out of extreme poverty by the end of the program, and that 7 years after, the benefits were sustained for 93% of the participants. This included a 37% increase in earnings, a 9-fold increase in savings, and a 2-fold increase in assets. Since it was pioneered by BRAC in 2002, the graduation approach has enabled more than 2.2 million households, that's over 9 million people, to pull themselves onto a sustainable pathway out of the poverty gap. Graduation approaches have been successfully applied by partners and BRAC to refugee and host communities contexts and within conflict settings with strong results, including in Afghanistan, the DRC, Yemen, amongst others. A recent randomized evaluation of Uganda's Graduating to Resilience activity by IPA finds large positive economic impacts on both the host and the refugees. On average, 30 months after receiving the first component of an economic inclusion package, households enjoy a higher level of productive assets, mainly livestock, income, consumption per capita, food security, and subjective well-being relative to non-program household. With this study, all variations of graduation program tested show large positive results on investment. The Poverty Alleviation Coalition, made up of UNHCR, the World Bank, and 16 NGOs, aims to increase self-reliance on economic and social inclusion of extreme poor refugee and host communities using this well-proven graduation approach. At the last GRF, the coalition pledged to work with 160,000 households in 27 countries by the end of 2023. Since this pledge, and up to the middle of 2023, the coalition has reached over 123,000 displaced, affected, and host community households. In our new pledge, the coalition plans to reach up to a total of 350,000 households by 2027. These are not just numbers. Behind each household is a family unit. As graduation looks to empower the most vulnerable, over 90% of program participants are women, a large part being women-led household. I was able to engage directly with a number of participants that had graduated over the past year. And while each one of them had a very unique and different story and pathway, there was a common thread in the stories that I heard from these women. Not only did the women I meet have a home, sustainable livelihood, and were able to provide for their family, but one critical aspect of the change they shared was going from invisibility within their own community to now being in a position of influence, not only due to their newfound livelihoods, but also because of the lived experience of lifting themselves out of extreme vulnerability, a learning they are really keen to share.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that background on the Poverty Alleviation Coalition's work as it does relate to the graduation approach, Mr. Albright. So my question to you is that given its vital linkages with social protection as a means of facilitating exit strategies, how do you feel the two complement each other to achieve durable solution for the forcibly displaced population?
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, we see the graduation as an empowerment strategy more than an exit strategy, an approach that really builds greater economic and social empowerment at the household level, making more impactful use of the limited resources available, particularly in crisis settings and displacement. This is why linking graduation to any existing social protection system makes a lot of sense. On the one hand, we have the formalized government social protection system, policy programs which help individuals and society manage risk and volatility and protect them from poverty and destitution. For the poorest and most marginalized, these programs often deliver cash transfer and in some cases insurances or other safety nets for the most vulnerable. In context of conflicts and for displacement, this safety net is provided by humanitarian responders who provide access to food, basic services, sanitation, water, and at times cash payment. We must also keep in mind that over and over again, particularly in the most extreme circumstances, this safety net provider is civil society, host communities, who often share extremely limited resources. This is when the graduation also can be at its best. As was clearly exemplified during yesterday's Hansen Award, local civil society actors not only carry the biggest burden, but also create the most adapted and impactful responses to the situation. So how can graduation and social protection complement each other in the strongest and provide strong impact? In view of scarce resources, pace and protracted nature of conflict, migration, displacement, and including the growing climate displacement we're seeing, it is not enough to tackle the immediate needs. Funds need to go to distance in terms of delivering empowerment outcomes for households, and ideally in ways that equip local partners, communities, and organizations to remain with the communities to better respond over the long term. Social protection mechanisms and graduation program each bring complementary advantages that can be better leveraged, making one deliver for the objectives of the others. So how can the social protection system be better leveraged? On the national schemes, we have scaled cash payment delivery system, including increasingly through mobile cash delivery, social registry that can help targeting the most vulnerable through proxy indicators, and the ability to connect to extension services, linkages, and other government programs, which are key enablers. On the humanitarian side, we have rapid procurement and delivery of vital goods and services, and expertise in rapidly building distribution systems. So the advantage of the graduation approach can bring is that they avoid silos by actually combining in an integrated manner and in a household center approach many of these essential elements of social protection in a way that amplifies and allows a transfer and allows us to be more than the sum of our parts. Perhaps most importantly, graduation programs work on more than the poverty of assets or skills. They also aim to address a poverty of hope and vision. And BRAC feels this is a critical element of the success of graduation approaches, especially important in context of forced displacement, where people have lost assets, saving, livelihoods, support systems, and as you also mentioned, the lack of their basic sense of agency. As a community, donors and practitioners, we need to be thinking about how to apply and leverage social protection intervention in a way that enhances long-term livelihood promotion, economic, social empowerment, and graduation is a good way and proved way to do this. In practical terms, this means recognizing the research and considering graduation programs as a way to better leverage social protection to work for the most vulnerable in refugee and host communities, leveraging the competencies that we each have to be able to deliver, but also keep at the heart of our intervention and recognize the agency of individuals, that unquantifiable driver of empowerment and success at the forefront. This means investing in triggering this agency by recognizing the right to build a livelihood and systematically enabling this to the maximum that the context will allow. Parallel funding to NGOs, community-based organizations, and local partners needs to be accelerated as the Poverty Alleviation Coalition is working to catalyze to enable this technical expertise, implementation, and support for graduation-like approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Albright. And I also would like to extend my sincere thanks to all the panelists for your great contribution to today's discussion. So now is the opportunity for interventions from the floor, where countries and organizations will have the opportunity to either announce your pledges or commitments or any additional best practices. So I would like to invite participants from the room. If you could kindly stand up, introduce yourself, and express your wish to make a short intervention in 1 to 2 minutes. So again, I would like to emphasize on the timing. So please keep it short and 1 to 2 minutes. And with that, I would like to call upon Morocco, if we have you in the room.
Bonjour, je suis Dr Méziane, je suis médecin spécialiste en santé publique. Je suis secrétaire général du ministère de la Santé et de la Protection sociale. J'aimerais partager avec vous un certain nombre de points. Je dirais que mon pays, le Royaume du Maroc, dispose d'une politique nationale d'immigration et d'asile. Cette politique a été initiée sur instruction royale depuis une quinzaine d'années. Elle a permis de mettre en place une stratégie nationale d'immigration et d'asile. Et dans ce cadre, mon ministère, le ministère de la Santé et de la Protection sociale, vient de signer en 2022 une convention très très importante, c'est avec le HCR, afin d'intégrer sur le plan social et protection sociale tous les demandeurs d'asile et les réfugiés. Par ailleurs, je dirais que le Royaume du Maroc est actuellement engagé dans la mise en œuvre d'un grand projet de généralisation de la protection sociale. Alors, la mise en œuvre de cette convention entre le ministère de la Santé et le HCR, elle intervient dans ce contexte particulier avec l'ambition de mettre en place un certain nombre d'actions. Je citerai premièrement, si vous le permettez, le renforcement à travers la couverture sanitaire universelle, l'accès des réfugiés et demandeurs d'asile aux services de santé de base. Deuxièmement, favoriser leur accès aux services de santé de deuxième et troisième niveau, les soins spécialisés, et puis faciliter la prise en charge dans les milieux et dans les hôpitaux universitaires. Aussi, si vous le permettez, participer avec les parties concernées à l'étude et l'élaboration des modalités d'inclusion de ces réfugiés. Il est à noter fort heureusement que la législation nationale marocaine relative au régime de sécurité sociale et l'assurance maladie obligatoire et à la réparation des accidents de travail ne se limite pas ou ne limite pas la couverture sociale aux ressortissants marocains. Les salariés étrangers, y compris les réfugiés exerçant une activité au Maroc, jouissent ou peuvent jouir des mêmes droits et obligations sans discrimination.
Thank you very much. I think next up we've got Slovenia, and again, you either can use the mic or come to the podium if you wish so. Whichever makes you comfortable. Please.
I can close to you. So, thank you. So refugees and all other immigrants in Slovenia, they are recognized as potential vulnerable group, which is for us very important. So this is why we include them in many different strategies and many different aspects. So the law and practice in Slovenia is saying that all people under international protection, they are treated on equal footing when exercising their social rights. But it doesn't mean that they are only included into national social welfare system, but they also have to get additional services to exercise their rights. So this is why in Slovenia we have the national integrational counselor who helps them to access national social welfare system.
Thank you for keeping it up to time. So now I would like to call upon Burkina Faso, and again, please feel free to come to the podium if you wish so, or use the mic as we have available in the room.
Merci bien. Je voudrais dire merci aux organisateurs qui nous permettent de présenter les avancées du Burkina Faso en matière de protection sociale, mais également d'évoquer les défis en la matière. Apparemment, je ne vois pas très bien ici. Voilà, merci bien. Alors, pour ce qui concerne donc le Burkina Faso, ces dernières années, le pays, malgré le contexte de sécurité difficile, et notamment la question également des personnes déplacées internes, vous connaissez très bien, a en effet entrepris d'importantes réformes pour la construction d'un système de protection sociale de qualité, permettant de venir en aide aux personnes les plus vulnérables, donc des réfugiés. Le renforcement de l'accès de l'état civil à travers la modernisation des outils d'enregistrement, la création de centres de production et l'organisation de nombreuses audiences foraines ont permis de délivrer la documentation aux réfugiés et aux personnes déplacées donc de force, de faciliter leur accès aux services de santé et de l'éducation, à l'aide humanitaire, et ont favorisé également leur inclusion économique. Dans cette même dynamique, la politique de gratuité des soins pour les femmes enceintes et les enfants de moins de 5 ans, mise en œuvre depuis 2016 par le Burkina, bénéficie également aux migrants et aux réfugiés. Il en est de même des différentes opérations de vaccination engagées par l'État. Par ailleurs, le développement de mutuelles de santé dans les localités d'accueil des personnes déplacées de force a permis de contribuer aux frais de santé de plusieurs centaines donc, de familles déplacées à l'intérieur du pays. Le Burkina Faso, qui vient d'adopter la stratégie nationale de relèvement des personnes déplacées internes et des communautés déplacées, de communautés hautes, excusez-moi, est en train de finaliser la mise en place de son régime social unique. Ce régime social sera donc mis à jour chaque 5 ans et permettra de collecter des informations adaptées auprès de 1,4 million de ménages les plus vulnérables. Cela va faciliter naturellement l'implémentation des programmes des filets sociaux et l'accès aux services sociaux de base. Un des enjeux majeurs est aussi de pouvoir intégrer de manière efficiente et sur une base consensuelle les critères de vulnérabilité des ménages réfugiés dans ce système. Pour cela, le Burkina Faso s'engage dans les prochaines années à développer une stratégie nationale d'inclusion des réfugiés qui devrait contribuer à une nette amélioration de leur accès aux instruments de protection sociale, à la santé, à la scolarité et à l'emploi. Ces mécanismes seront aussi accompagnés de réalisations concrètes en termes d'infrastructures et d'opportunités économiques dans les zones d'accueil des personnes déplacées de force. Enfin, la poursuite des efforts pour la modernisation de l'état civil et l'implémentation de solutions digitales pour l'enrichissement devront favoriser cette inclusion sociale. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to call upon now Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Do we have a representative here? Yep, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much. My name is Diana Dalton. I'm the head of the Gender and Equalities work for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK. So we fully endorse the commitment to expand access for social protection for forcibly displaced populations and migrants. And it's incredibly encouraging to hear from Colombia and Mauritania on their principle of integration and their political leadership that they've clearly demonstrated. Our new white paper that was produced just a few short weeks ago, some of you may have gone to a launch here in Geneva of it yesterday. It makes reference 40 times to social protection, so we're really pleased about that. And it recognizes its value as a tool to build resilience and create opportunity for all. And we will too be stepping up our work on this agenda. The UK provides funding and technical assistance to support delivery of this agenda. And we work across several countries in line with the commitments outlined in the Global Compact for Refugees. Just a quick example, we're supporting host governments with the integration of forcibly displaced populations into national systems in Jordan and Uganda. In Jordan, the UK supports the Jordan Protection Programme, which aims to strengthen the capacity of refugees, vulnerable Jordanians, and wider communities to prevent and respond to the protection risks. We seek to transition purely humanitarian approaches into a sustainable model that's integrated with national systems. And it includes also systems for gender-based violence and improving support for those with disabilities. So if they work together far more closely and far better, development and humanitarian actors can support governments really effectively to ensure that they have the robust social protection systems that they need to meet the specific needs and capacities of displaced people. And it will recognise their contribution to the national economy, including participation in social insurance schemes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is UNICEF. Do we have anyone here? Yep, great.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So globally, only 1 in 4 children have access to any social protection coverage, and for refugee children, that's even a smaller number. And at the same time, refugee children are 3 times more likely to be poor than adults. So for UNICEF, extending social protection coverage to children, including vulnerable refugee children, is primordial. And that's why this pledge is so important to us. As UNICEF, this is an area we've been working in a number of places, from Lebanon to Jordan to Brazil to Turkey. And what we promise here today and what we pledge is to strengthen inclusive social protection systems in 8 countries, which form part of the Prospects Partnership: Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Uganda, Kenya, Sudan, Iraq, and Ethiopia, and to provide technical assistance to set up a global mechanism with partners to consolidate evidence and share learning on inclusive social protection and public finance management systems. Thank you.
Excellent. If I can come down to ILO, Yep, please feel free to come to the podium if you wish so.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vazi-Fedus. My name is Shahra Razavi. I'm the director of the Social Protection Department at the International Labour Organization. Very happy to be here. It was great hearing the panelists. But maybe just a reality check. What we know is that refugee workers do face very serious and immense hurdles in being able to access decent work opportunities and also social protection. This is often aggravated by the fact that they face not only deep-rooted discrimination, but also very practical hurdles, administrative hurdles, lack of information because of language difficulties in accessing information, as well as the fact that very often they have unpredictable duration of their stay in the countries where they are, in the host communities, because of questions about their residence permits or work permits, if they have any. So these are the real hurdles that they face. The ILO supports in a very practical way the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees through the promotion of decent work agenda, the promotion of universal social protection and universal health coverage. I think these are the kind of strong commitments that we have, and also that these be inclusive of refugees and also of displaced persons. And this is really what is needed to create that kind of unified system that Mr. Annan was referring to initially, not segmented systems. This is very important for, as I said, refugees and internally displaced communities. And it's also in line with the international standards that we have in international human rights standards, international social security standards that speak about the key principles of non-discrimination and equality of treatment between nationals and non-nationals. So again, these unified systems also speak to those standards. Now, having access to national social protection systems, whether it's contributory or non-contributory for refugees, is absolutely key, so that these are the same systems that are available to host communities. And this can be very cost effective. It can get them off dependence on humanitarian assistance, but also very importantly, it reduces the kind of tensions that arise when refugees have access to cash transfers through humanitarian support that nationals don't have access to. It aggravates tensions within those communities where they are. So very importantly, we have to bear in mind that the human right to social security, to social protection, is something that is only available to about 20% of people in low income countries compared to about 90% in high income countries. This is the context within which the majority of refugees are. So what this really means is that we have to really improve access to social protection for refugees and migrants, going hand in hand with extending social protection for everyone in those host communities to really be able to reduce social tensions and create the sustainability. Now, for the past decade, ILO and UNHCR have been supporting together jointly countries to integrate refugees into national social health protection systems. So this is not pie in the sky, it's happening on the ground in Africa and in the Middle East. And more recently, not only in the area of health, but also other areas of social security, with very concrete and positive outcomes through the Prospects Partnership, reference to which was already made, and through the joint action plan that we have with UNHCR for 2023-25. And just to give you one more concrete example, in the case of Jordan, and this is the last point, in 2022, the Social Security Corporation, which is a public institution in charge of Social Security administration, established an Estimada Plus Plus program, which is about extending social security to vulnerable informal workers, including refugees. Again, an indication of how we can have that inclusion work. And so my last word is, progress has been made in various countries to build comprehensive social protection systems that are inclusive of refugees. And these are the things that we have pledged to and will continue to work on.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shahra. We probably have time only for 1 or 2, but again, I have to remind you, please keep it to 1 or 2 minutes. And I'm going to call upon Danish Refugee Council. Do we have anyone here? Yep, excellent. You can come. Let's use the podium this time.
Let's use it then. Thank you very much to the panelists. It's with great pleasure that I announce the Poverty Alleviation Coalition's pledge in front of you today.
We pledged to implement programs using the graduation approach to alleviate poverty among 190,000 households who are affected by displacement and host community households in more than 35 countries over the next 3 years, 24 to 27, so that we reach a total of 350,000 households since the Poverty Alleviation Coalition was launched. And that happened in 2019, and it consists of UNHCR, the World Bank Partnership for Economic Inclusion, and 16 INGOs that work with technical assistance, implementation, and research. The graduation model is one of few poverty alleviation strategies that work consistently across countries and cultures and conditions. Mr. Albright explained very well, of course, that the graduation approach uses a holistic set of interventions that address the multidimensional aspects of poverty and expands the scope of social protection to hard to reach and marginalized communities in general. So the coalition will bring together the strength of its members and use direct programming and evidence building to work towards a common vision, that vision of increasing self-reliance, economic and social inclusion of not only refugees and internally displaced, but also of returnees and stateless people and host community households. With these few words, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to announce this pledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Our time is almost up, so I'm just going to call on the last intervention, and my apology that I'm not able to actually make an open call. So do we have European Parliament here with us? Excellent.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for having the opportunity to contribute to this very important discussion. I would like to emphasize the following things. I think social protection is not only a universal human right, but also an economic and social necessity for development and progress. Goals 1 and 3 of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development address the expansion of social protection, which explicitly applies equally to all people, including displaced persons and refugees. I would like to highlight the strengthening of social protection systems generally benefits both refugees and the ordinary people of the host communities. In practice, numerous barriers hinder the inclusion of refugees in the national social protection system. Some of these include their exclusion in national legislation, their temporary status, and others. And so the question is, how can refugees ever participate on an equal footing, socially, politically, professionally, if they are institutionally and structurally disadvantaged? How can we ensure that refugees are placed in standard employment relationships and not in precarious employment relations? And last but not least, I would like to underline, I think the Temporary Protection Directive of the European Union, which was enacted towards the Ukrainians after the start of the Russian war against Ukraine, shows that displaced persons can have access to the labor market and to social rights. And I think this is the way it could work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that really brings us to the end, and I'd like to express my deepest appreciation again to all of our panelists for their valuable contribution, as well as for the audience engagement. So as we look ahead, let's continue to work together to bridge the gap between humanitarian and development efforts and create a more sustainable future for forcibly displaced population. So thank you again for being part of this important conversation. And now I hand over to Mr.
Maybe there are a few more interventions from the floor before we wrap up, okay?
Do we have time?
Yeah, I think so. It's the last one.
Okay, no problems. And who do we call upon?
WFP.
If you can, yeah, thank you.
I can be very brief, and I'll do it from here. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the World Food Programme, I underscore our commitment to refugee economic inclusion and social protection. We traditionally approach social protection by empowering governments to enhance food and nutrition security, and increasingly recognize the need to place refugees at the forefront of this discourse. Germany and the World Bank, partners in this room, play pivotal roles as donors supporting our work. In Mauritania, we have collaborated with the government, World Bank, and UNHCR to integrate refugees into national social protection programs. We are committed to further investing in this area, and we are pledging at the global level to develop data-driven business cases with UNHCR, focusing on joint analysis, advocacy, and programming to support refugee inclusion in national social protection systems. And in partnership with hosting governments, UNHCR and partners in Colombia, WFP pledges to promote more inclusive social protection systems, including by contributing to the inclusion of approximately 1.3 million migrants into the official beneficiary registration systems, a prerequisite for accessing basic services and social protection services. In Djibouti, WFP commits to supporting access for an expanded number of refugees in the Programme National de Solidarité Famille, which provides social assistance to nationals. And then in Burundi, WFP will support the integration of refugees and host communities into the National Social Registry and the social protection programs to address poverty and vulnerabilities across all stages of life. We look forward to working with our partners towards a future where economic inclusion and social protection are tangible realities for refugees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mathieu, do we have any more time to take some more?
If there are, maybe.
Do we have any other intervention from the floor that you would like to present on?
If not, we can just move on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I would like to hand over now to Mr. Sajjad Malik to do the formal closing. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. It's such rich discussion, and we perhaps want to spend more time here. First of all, thank you to the panel here. Very rich conversations, good examples that we could then draw on from Germany, Colombia, Mauritania, detail, the way you've handled the whole social protection programs in your area and the challenges that you're facing, but also from the floor, Morocco, Slovenia, Burkina Faso, that was very helpful for us to understand the challenges there, which you are going through and the way you're managing it. Few areas that come out that we need to take in perspective as we go forward. One is on the enabling policy environment, and in the Colombia situation, temporary protection, also in European context, temporary protection helped create that environment. As also highlighted in the interventions, political support is necessary. This is in some countries, it's crucial that we have that. And then the resources, as Germany asked, so it's the big question, who will pay for it? The resources are required, at least in the medium term, is also if it suggested our World Bank colleagues. And then lastly, the civil documentation for refugees, the work permits, and related documentations, resident permits and all that. These are essential for them to be able to avail the opportunities that are out there. We also heard throughout the session that the work that is being done by BRAC in other partners, very, very helpful to us to understand the graduation model and how it can be complementary and support social protection programs. Area that we need to keep in mind has to have a responsible transition from humanitarian assistance. That's an area that we need to keep, especially moving in areas where social protection national systems are not that strong. And again, highlighting that majority of the refugees are hosted in low-income countries, middle-income countries. So we need to be mindful of the shocks that we, including the one that the COVID created for many of the situations to look into. equally important to highlight that inclusion in national systems, be it education, health, energy, we have had other side panels which were looking at these issues as well. Social protection systems alone does not constitute or does not equate to durable solutions. This is self-reliance moving towards in that direction, and that supports any of the solutions, the 3 durable solutions or pathways to solutions but it is essential that we work towards those solutions. And lastly, let me just highlight what the World Bank, the medium-term financial commitments that are required. How do we include the inclusion of refugees? It's the 3 T's that the World Bank highlighted: targeting, tailoring of services, and training of training. It's the essentials that we need to take that into account. Useful models there. We also would like to see going forward more of engagement on the graduation model in other countries that you are trying to replicate elsewhere. Before I thank all the pledges, my colleagues from ILO, UNICEF, WFP, Danish Refugee Council, but all other pledges that from FCDO and others that are coming in, we're very, very appreciative of that. We need to make sure that we develop the social protection work that we are doing. We are at a stage where we need to engage more partners. And going forward, we have a group of friends which we are looking at for social protection. We'll be working together towards the promoting social protection, and we are in the 2023 GRF, and if we can give ourselves 2027, the next GRF 3, and what's been pledged here and the work that we want to do with the Friends of Social Protection group, with all of your participation and engagement, hopefully we'll have more results to show by the time we're in the 3rd GRF to talk about. And one last point before we close, 114 million. This is a human capital, as you've highlighted the panel. We cannot let them lock down in humanitarian assistance for protracted period, 20, 30, 40 years of humanitarian assistance only. And we've seen refugees in the whole of GRF. One more example, brilliant one sitting next to me here, how they become productive members of society if they're given the opportunity to avail the potential that they have. So there is that potential locked in, which we need to avail, and these possibilities can create those opportunities. Thank you very much for this extra time. It was long, but the subject is interesting, and there's a lot more to do in this particular area. But thank you very much, and have the rest of the afternoon, and then tomorrow, a wonderful participation here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.